Can I borrow $100 to pay for my diploma? The poor girl pleaded on a rainy city sidewalk, clutching a crumpled notice like it was her last lifeline. Unaware the man she'd stopped was a calm CEO millionaire whose decisions quietly moved millions. To him, $100 was less than the tip he often forgot in the pocket of his tailored suit, but to her that $100 was the fragile line between finally holding a diploma or watching 4 brutal years of struggle dissolve into another closed door. People brushed past them, seeing only a poor girl begging for $100 and a man in polished shoes, but neither the crowd nor the poor girl knew that what would happen next would shock everyone and rewrite both of their stories. Who was this CEO millionaire really? Beneath the perfect tie and unreadable eyes, why did a poor girl desperate to pay for her diploma choose him, of all people, to plead, "Can I borrow $100? And when he finally answered, would he just hand over the money? Or open a door into a life she never imagined was waiting for her? Rain hammered Eastwood Avenue like it was trying to wash the whole city away. Maya Collins pulled her thin, faded jacket tighter around her shoulders, but the cold still slipped through the fabric and into her bones. Her worn-out sneakers squished with every step, soles nearly split, toes damp. She'd walked this street 1,000 times over 4 years between campus, the diner where she worked nights, and the cramped apartment she shared with a roommate who still owed her 2 months' rent. This was supposed to be a good day. Graduation was tomorrow. She should have been thinking about caps, gowns, photos, and her mother's proud smile on a cracked phone screen. Instead, her eyes kept locking on the words printed in red at the top of the letter clutched in her hand. Final notice. Outstanding balance. $100. Diploma hold. Her stomach twisted. 4 years of juggling 3 part-time jobs, studying, during 2 a.m., coffee refills, crying quietly in library bathrooms because she couldn't afford textbooks, and now, $100 stupid dollars threatened to freeze her diploma in some office drawer. She could walk at graduation, sure, but she wouldn't receive the actual diploma until the fee was paid. $100. To some people it was a casual brunch. To her, it was rent, groceries, and now, the price tag on her future. Maya stopped under the awning of a closed corner shop, trying to shield herself from the worst of the rain. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark window. Damp hair pulled into a frizzy ponytail, jacket too thin for April, jeans faded to almost gray, sneakers that looked like they'd survived a war. She imagined herself standing among polished classmates tomorrow, sleek heels, tailored suits, perfect families while she crossed the stage in these beat-up shoes. The thought made her chest cave in. I can't look like this, she whispered to herself. Not tomorrow, not after everything. But what hurt more wasn't the sneakers or the jacket. It was the knowledge that she didn't even have the $100 to make sure she truly graduated. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, another overdue bill reminder. She didn't bother looking. The numbers never changed, only grew worse. She thought of her mom working double shifts at the nursing home back in their small town, sending $10 here, $20 there, always saying, "The world won't wait for you, baby. You fight for every inch." Her mom had no idea the diploma was on hold. Maya hadn't had the heart to tell her. A car splashed through a puddle, sending a wave of water onto the curb. Maya jumped back just in time, pressing her back against the brick wall. Her breath came out in white puffs. She could go back to the diner, beg her manager for an advance. Again, she could text friends who were just as broke as she was. She could call her mom and hear her voice tighten with worry. Or, her gaze drifted to the endless river of people flowing down Eastwood Avenue. Umbrellas, briefcases, backpacks, expensive coats. So many faces, none of them looking at her. Her heart hammered. Could she really do it? Walk up to a stranger and ask for $100? Can I borrow $100 to pay for my diploma? The words felt humiliating even in her head. Her throat tightened. She didn't like asking for help. She'd spent her whole life learning how not to. But the deadline stamped on the notice echoed in her skull. Tomorrow morning. No payment, no release. Her fingers were so cold they barely felt like they belonged to her. That's when she saw him. He stepped out of a black sedan parked at the curb, a tall man in a charcoal-tailored suit. White shirt crisp even under the rain. Dark hair slicked back. His polished shoes shone even in the gray light, like they didn't know what it meant to touch dirty sidewalks. He carried no umbrella, just moved, through the rain with the kind of calm that didn't flinch at anything. Maya couldn't explain why her eyes clung to him. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, like the city bent around him instead of the other way around. Maybe it was the subtle, expensive watch on his wrist, or the way the driver rushed around to close the car door for him. He looked like he belonged somewhere high above street level, in glass offices she could only see from a distance. Her pulse kicked harder. You fight for every inch. Her mother's voice again. Before she could talk herself out of it, Before the shame could catch up and choke her, Maya stepped away from the wall and into the rain. Her sneakers splashed. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the traffic. "Excuse me," she called, her voice small against the city. The man glanced sideways, then slowed, turning toward her fully. Up close, he looked even more put together. No raindrop seemed to stick to him for long. His eyes, gray, sharp, but not cruel, rested on her face, then traveled downward, taking in her soaked jacket, the crumpled notice in her hand, her worn-out sneakers. Maya's mouth went dry. She realized then how she must look. Poor, desperate, blocking his path on Eastwood Avenue. People flowed around them like water around stones, barely noticing. "Yes," he said calmly, voice steady, smooth. "Can I help you?" She swallowed. Her fingers tightened on the paper until it nearly tore. "Can I?" The words stuck in her throat, heavy with pride, shame, fear. She forced herself to push them out. "Can I borrow $100 to pay for my diploma?" she blurted, her voice trembling. I graduate tomorrow, and they're holding it until I clear this balance, and I've been working, but..." Her eyes dropped to the ground, heat flooding her cheeks. "I don't have it, and I don't know who else to ask." There it was. Her pride laid out on the wet pavement, between them. For a moment, the only sound was the rain. The man didn't immediately reach for his wallet. He didn't walk away, either. He just studied her, his gaze moving from her face to the letter, to her sneakers again. "Your diploma," he said quietly. "You're a student at Eastwood University?" She nodded quickly, clutching the notice closer. "Yes, business major." "Well, almost. I passed all my exams. I just need to clear this fee." He held out his hand. "May I see it?" She hesitated, then placed the damp paper in his palm. His hands were steady, nails trimmed, a small scar near his thumb that didn't fit the rest of his polished look. His eyes scanned the notice, and for a fraction of a second, she thought she saw something shift in his expression, like recognition or calculation, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "And why?" he asked, folding the paper carefully. "Should I lend you $100? Her head snapped up. Because I'll pay you back," she stammered. "I'm starting job applications." He tilted his head. "That's not what I mean." Rain slid down the side of his face as he really looked at her now, like she wasn't just some random interruption, but a question he needed to solve. "Why?" he repeated slowly. "Did you choose me to ask? Out of everyone on this street, why me?" Maya's breath hitched. She could lie. She could say he seemed kind. She could say he was the only one who looked like he had $100 to spare. Instead, exhausted and soaked to the bone, she told the truth. "Because you look like someone who wouldn't miss it," she said softly. "But also, you look like someone who'd understand what it means to work for something and lose it over something small. I don't know why. You just do." A corner of his mouth twitched, almost like he was fighting a smile. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya. Maya Collins." He nodded once. "Maya." His gaze dropped again, this time to her sneakers, waterlogged and frayed at the seams. He stared at them for a long moment, as if they were telling him a story too. "Do you have something to wear for your graduation tomorrow?" he asked. She blinked, thrown by the shift. I have this jacket. And these." She glanced down at her shoes, suddenly painfully aware of how pathetic they looked. "I was just going to clean them up as best I could." Students laughed as they passed by, their voices blending with the rain. Somewhere across the street, a girl in a bright dress and expensive heels twirled under an umbrella. Her friends filmed her on their phones. Maya swallowed. The man let out a slow breath, as if weighing something. "I see," he murmured. Then, without warning, he stepped closer. The air around him smelled faintly of rain and clean cologne. Before she could move, he reached down not toward his wallet, but toward his feet. Maya's eyes widened as he bent slightly, hands moving to the laces of his polished shoes. "What are you doing?" she asked, the words slipping out in a nervous whisper. He didn't answer right away. He straightened, one hand gripping the umbrella the driver had silently pressed into his grasp a moment ago, the other resting on the toe of his left shoe. His gaze locked with hers, steady and unreadable. "You need $100 for your diploma," he said quietly, "and you don't want to walk into your graduation looking like the world chewed you up and spat you out." Her face burned. It was exactly how she felt. He loosened his tie with one hand, as if somehow that made this less formal, less strange. "The money," he continued, "is the easy part. But the way you see yourself when you step on that campus tomorrow, that's harder to buy." He slid his foot out of the first shoe. Maya stared. "You know. Wait, you don't have to," she protested, voice cracking. He ignored her, removing the second shoe and stepping onto the damp sidewalk in plain black dress socks. The driver froze by the car, mouth slightly open. He placed the polished shoes on the dry patch of concrete near her feet, right beside her frayed sneakers. "For one day," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Wear these instead." Maya's brain stumbled. I asked for money. "Not, I know what you asked for," he replied. "And we're not done talking about the $100. But first, I want you to understand something." He nodded toward the shoes, his gleaming, expensive, powerful, sitting next to hers, broken and tired. "These don't carry your story," he said softly. "You do. Tomorrow, when you walk across that stage, I want you to feel, if only for a moment, what it's like to step in a world that keeps telling you you don't belong. I want to see what you do with that." Her heart thudded in her ears. Rain soaked her hair, her jacket, the paper in his hand. People still rushed by. But in that moment, Eastwood Avenue shrank to a circle of damp concrete, 2 pairs of shoes, and a stranger who somehow saw too much. She looked from his shoes to his face. "Why?" she whispered. His eyes softened, just a fraction. "Because most people would have given up before they ever got to this point, Maya. You didn't. That interests me." He glanced at his watch, then back at her. "Take the shoes," he said. "Go home. Sleep. Show up tomorrow. We'll talk about the $100 after you walk across that stage." Her throat closed around 1,000 questions. What if you don't show up?" she managed. He smiled slightly, the kind of smile that promised both danger and opportunity. "Oh, I'll be there," he said. "It's your move now." Then he handed her the crumpled notice, turned barefoot in socks toward the waiting car, and slid into the back seat as if walking barefoot on a cold, wet sidewalk was the most normal thing in the world. Maya stood frozen, rain sliding down her face, the weight of his polished shoes in her hands and a new, terrifying thought in her chest. What if this moment on Eastwood Avenue wasn't just about $100 or shoes, but the first step into a life she never believed she could touch? She looked down at the shoes again, their leather catching the weak light, and felt a strange mix of fear and fragile hope. She had no idea that the man who'd just handed her his shoes was a CEO millionaire who had already decided her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, sunlight fought its way through thin curtains and landed right on the pair of polished shoes by the door. For a second, waking in her tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a coffee smell that never completely left, Maya thought she'd dreamed Eastwood Avenue. The rain, the stranger, the humiliation of asking, "Can I borrow $100 to pay for my diploma?" The shock of him taking off his own shoes and placing them beside her ruined sneakers. But the shoes were real. They sat neatly by the door like they owned the space, dark leather gleaming even in the dull morning light, wildly out of place against the scuffed linoleum and the pile of thrift store boots in the corner. Her alarm buzzed for the 3rd time. She slapped it off and sat up slowly, heart pounding with a mix of nerves and something that felt suspiciously like hope. Graduation day. She swung her legs over the bed and winced as her feet met the cold floor. For a moment she just sat there, toes curling, staring at the shoes. "What are you doing, Maya?" she muttered to herself. "You don't even know his name." She replayed his words from the night before. "We'll talk about the $100 after you walk across that stage. I'll be there." He hadn't promised anything else. Just that. No guarantee about the money. No explanation of why a man with a driver, a tailored suit, and the calm of someone used to being obeyed decided to walk barefoot into a car just so she could wear his shoes. She showered quickly, hands shaking, then pulled on the only dress she owned that could pass for graduation appropriate, a simple navy blue she'd bought on clearance 2 years ago for a scholarship dinner she almost hadn't been invited to. It was a little tighter now, but it still zipped. She smoothed it down over her hips and tried not to think about the girls who'd be wearing custom outfits today. At the mirror, she did what she could with her hair, taming the frizz into a low bun. Her face looked tired, dark circles smudged under her eyes, but there was a fierceness there too, a stubbornness that 4 years of scraping by had carved deep into her bones. Her gaze slid back to the shoes by the door. They almost seemed to watch her. She picked one up, the leather cool and solid in her hand. There was weight to it, not just physical, but symbolic, like holding someone else's world. The inside was lined with soft leather, her fingers brushing over an engraved logo she couldn't pronounce. "Okay," she whispered, "just for today." She sat on the edge of the bed and slipped her foot in. They were a size too big, but not ridiculously so. With her dress socks on and the laces pulled tight, they stayed on well enough. When she stood, she felt different, taller, heavier. Like each step would leave a mark. Her old sneakers sat abandoned by the wall, their ragged edges and worn soles a story written in every shift, every overnight library crawl, Every walk home when the buses stopped running, and she didn't have money for a ride. She looked between the two pairs one last time. The world won't wait for you, baby. You fight for every inch. Her mother's voice again. I'm fighting, she murmured, grabbing her thrift store tote and her cap and gown. I promise. By the time she reached campus, the air had warmed. The storm scrubbed from the sky. Eastwood University glittered in morning light, banners flapping in school colors, families spilling out of cars with bouquets and balloons. Maya stepped onto the courtyard, the man's polished shoes clicking against the stone path. Every sound felt too loud, like everyone could hear that she didn't belong in them. Clusters of graduates posed for photos in front of the fountain. Parents dabbed at their eyes. Professors adjusted sashes and shook hands. Laughter floated over the mild chaos, buoyant and easy. Maya smoothed down her gown and tried to blend in. She couldn't help comparing. Perfect curls, professional makeup, nails done. Watches that cost more than her entire last semester's rent. Shoes, so many pairs of shiny shoes glittered in the sun. She glanced down at her own feet. The shoes still looked impossibly expensive, but on her, they felt like a costume. Imposter syndrome wrapped itself around her chest, tight and unrelenting. Who do you think you are, walking in a stranger's shoes? But beneath the fear, another feeling quietly pressed through. Courage. Fragile, yes, but real. Every time the leather met the ground, a small part of her straightened. She had walked through rain, hunger, and exhaustion to get here. The shoes weren't her story. She was. As she made her way toward the graduation hall, memories began to bleed through the edges of the present. Her first semester, sitting on the floor of the 24-hour library because all the seats were taken, reading borrowed notes instead of the $180 textbook she couldn't afford, her stomach growling so loudly she'd pressed her arms around it and pretended she was cold. The fall she'd worked 3 jobs, campus mailroom, diner server, and overnight cleaning crew just to stay enrolled, napping for 40 minutes in a bathroom stall between shifts, then heading straight to an 8 a.m. exam. The winter she'd gotten sick and still gone to work, voice hoarse, because missing one shift meant not paying the electric bill, studying under a single lamp when the rest of the apartment was dark, fingers numb, telling herself it would be worth it when she finally held that diploma. The spring she'd spent her birthday shelving books in the campus library, watching groups of friends walk past with balloons and cake and pretending it didn't hurt. Loneliness had been her constant shadow. People came and went from group projects and clubs, but she was always the one who said, "Sorry, I have to go to work." When others suggested coffee or study groups, she'd built a life out of saying no to everything but survival. Now, as she climbed the steps to the hall, the voices of her classmates rose around her inside jokes. Shared memories. Remember when we bombed that midterm? Remember the road trip junior year? She had no stories like that. Her memories were of burnt coffee, slipped pay envelopes, and sticky diner floors. Maya? The voice cut through the noise. She turned. Professor Dana Harper, her advisor, was standing near the entrance, a stack of programs in one hand, her gown draped in an honors sash. Professor Harper's sharp eyes swept over Maya, pausing for a half-second on the shoes before returning to her face. "You made it," Professor Harper said, a smile tugging at her mouth. "I was starting to worry you'd be late." Maya swallowed. "Would have taken wild horses to keep me away." Harper's gaze softened. "How are you feeling?" Maya forced a laugh. "Like an imposter. But, an imposter with a cap and gown. So that's progress." Professor Harper stepped closer, lowering her voice as a group of students pushed past into the hall. "Listen to me, Maya," she said. "You are the last person on this campus who gets to call herself an imposter. I've seen your file. I've seen your grades. I've watched you drag yourself into my 9 a.m. class after working late and still outthink half the room." Maya's throat tightened. "I also know," Harper continued, "that financial aid did you no favors this year. And yet, here you are." Maya blinked fast, not trusting her voice. "Sometimes it still feels like they made a mistake letting me in," she murmured. Harper shook her head firmly. "No, we make mistakes letting in kids who coast, not the ones who claw their way here. You earned every inch of this." Her eyes flicked down again, amusement flashing briefly. "And those are new." Maya's face heated. "They're borrowed," she admitted. "Long story." "I like long stories," Harper said, clearly curious but not pressing. "Tell me someday. For now, just know this. When you walk across that stage, you're not borrowing anything. Not success, not belonging. That part is all yours." The words landed with a weight that almost made Maya dizzy. All hers. Her heart thudded against her ribs. For a moment, the noise around them blurred, the banners faded, and all she could feel was the solid ground beneath those borrowed shoes and the strange sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as small as she'd always felt. "Thank you," she whispered. Harper squeezed her arm. "Go inside. Find your seat. Let yourself have this. The rest of your life will get loud again soon enough." Maya nodded and stepped toward the entrance. The doors loomed ahead, decorated with balloons and banners. She hesitated at the threshold and did one slow sweep of the crowd on the lawn, heart thumping. Was he here? Her eyes skimmed through faces, parents with cameras, siblings with signs, students waving. No sign of the stranger in the tailored suit, no polished shoes, no calm gray eyes watching her from the sidelines. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe she'd never see him again. Maybe the shoes were just a strange act of kindness from some anonymous man she'd never meet twice in a city like this. Or maybe he was already inside. The thought sent a shiver through her. She drew in a breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the graduation hall, the polished shoes echoing on the floor like a promise she didn't fully understand. The graduation hall buzzed like a beehive. Voices ricocheted off high ceilings, programs rustled, camera shutters clicked, rows of chairs stretched across the floor, filled with students in caps and gowns, tassels swaying as they shifted and craned to spot their families in the stands. Maya sat somewhere in the middle, hands clenched around the edge of her folding chair, knees pressed close together. The fabric of her gown pooled around her ankles, hiding the polished shoes, but she could feel them solid, grounding, impossibly out of place under her. Her row stood, then sat, then stood again as people shuffled past to find seats. Names were already being practiced under nervous breaths. Laughter came in spurts as someone tripped, someone shouted across rows, someone yelled, "We did it," and got a cheer in response. But all she could think was, is he here? She'd scanned the crowd when she first walked in, eyes sweeping over the stands. Parents in their Sunday best, kids swinging their legs, grandparents holding bouquets, her chest tight with nerves. She'd looked for a flash of a charcoal suit, a familiar jawline, gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. Nothing. On the stage, the faculty began to file in, robed and solemn. The university president, the deans, the guest speaker. They took their seats as the crowd's noise dimmed to a respectful murmur. The band started a soft, triumphant tune. Maya tried to breathe. "You're here," she told herself. "You made it into this room. Diploma or no diploma, you earned this seat." Still, her gaze drifted to the angled aisle where the stands began. Families leaned forward in anticipation. She thought of her mom, miles away, sitting on the edge of a worn couch, watching the live stream on an old tablet, probably holding her breath the same way. "Ladies and gentlemen," the president began, voice booming through the speakers, "today we celebrate your hard work, your perseverance." The rest blurred into a warm hum, words about resilience, leadership, the future. It was the same speech every graduating class heard, but to Maya, certain phrases cut through like they were meant for her alone. Those who worked multiple jobs, those who were the first in their family to be here, those who thought about giving up and didn't. Her fingers dug into her gown. As speeches rolled on, she kept scanning, pretending to stretch her neck or adjust her cap. Every now and then she thought she glimpsed him in the corner of her eye, a figure in a suit near the back. But when she looked directly, it was always someone else. "Stop it," she scolded herself. "He's a stranger. His shoes don't promise anything." But her heart wouldn't listen. "Now," the dean of students said at last, "we will begin conferring degrees." Rows shifted, rustled. Ushers moved to guide them. The ceremony machine roared to life, name cards in hand, lines forming in the aisles. Maya stood with her row, her program trembling in her fingers. The shoes felt heavier now, like they knew this was the moment they'd been handed over for. She stepped into the line. The students ahead of her moved one by one toward the stage steps, names read out in steady rhythm. Each name was followed by a wave of cheers from some corner of the room, families exploding with pride. Garcia, Elena, Jackson, Troy, Lambert, Nicole. Maya's heart beat in time with the steps of the line. The closer she got to the stage, the more unreal it felt. 4 years of trying not to fall apart, and it all funneled into this narrow chute, leading to a bright strip of stage. Halfway up the aisle, she paused. Something flickered in her peripheral vision. She turned her head slightly, trying not to break the flow of the line. There, near the middle of the stands, not with the noisy parents or the sign-waving siblings, but in a quieter section where a few distinguished guests sat, she saw him, the stranger from Eastwood Avenue. No rain now, no car at the curb, no blur of traffic. Just him, in another immaculate suit, this one a deep navy with a crisp white shirt and a patterned tie. His posture was relaxed but precise, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded loosely in his lap. He wasn't cheering or clapping wildly. He watched. It wasn't a casual glance either. His gaze swept the line of graduates with calm precision, pausing on faces, like he was cataloging each one, evaluating, measuring. Then his eyes found hers. The noise of the hall dimmed. He didn't smile. Not fully. But his expression shifted, the smallest lift at the corner of his mouth, a flash of recognition in those gray eyes that said, "You made it. Good." Her chest tightened. He'd come. For her? The line nudged forward, and she had to turn away, but the sight of him burned behind her eyelids. Calm, commanding, sitting like someone used to being exactly where he needed to be. "Who are you?" she wondered. "Collins, Maya." Her name sliced through her thoughts. An usher gestured, and she realized she was next. Her feet moved on autopilot, one polished shoe in front of the other, up the short flight of stairs and onto the stage. The lights were brighter up here, hot against her skin. The band played softly. The audience became a blur of colors and shapes as she walked toward the dean, hand extended. Each step in those shoes felt like a heartbeat. She heard her name again through the speakers, echoing off the rafters. For a flicker of a second, she imagined her mom hearing it at the exact same time, a town away, on a glitchy live stream. The dean pressed the diploma case into her hands. For a moment, the cardboard weighed more than any box she'd carried at the diner, more than any tray she'd balanced on sore arms. This wasn't the physical diploma, not yet. Not without that $100, but it symbolized all the tests passed, all the nights survived. "Congratulations," the dean murmured, smiling. "Thank you," she breathed. She turned to walk across the stage, fingers gripping the case so tightly her knuckles ached. The band swelled. Camera lights flashed. She forced herself to look out into the crowd, not at the blur, but at something specific. Her gaze scanned the stands. He was still there. Now, his posture had shifted slightly, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, that same thoughtful focus trained on her. When her eyes found his, he gave the slightest nod. It was nothing, barely there, but to her, it was a tether. For 4 years, she'd walked through this place feeling invisible. The girl who served coffee at the midnight study sessions, then sat outside the classroom with borrowed notes. The one who always slipped away first because she had to make bus schedules and shift times. Now, under hot stage lights, with everyone watching, one person's quiet acknowledgement cut through all of that. She held his gaze for a breath she didn't know she was allowed to take, then moved off stage, heart crashing against her ribs. Back in her seat, surrounded by whoops and hugs and tassel flicking, the ceremony kept rolling. More names, more cheers, more caps askew. But the world inside her felt shifted. Why was he here? Why did he care whether she made it across that stage? What did he mean last night about seeing what she'd do if she stepped into a world that kept insisting she didn't belong? By the time the last name was called and the president shouted, "Graduates, you may now move your tassels from right to left." Her head spun. Tassels flipped. Caps flew. The hall erupted in cheers. Maya laughed, a choked, disbelieving sound, her hand pressed over her mouth. The polished shoes thudded against the floor as she jumped with the others. The diploma case clutched to her chest like a shield. She had done it. But as the hall emptied into the bright afternoon, students spilling outside in a rush of color and noise, she wasn't thinking about photos or parties. She was thinking about the man in the stands. The fountain courtyard became a blur of camera flashes and clusters of families. Someone sprayed sparkling cider. Someone cried. A group of guys tackled each other in a loud, laughing dog pile. Maya slipped toward the edge of the chaos, nearer to the fountain, where the spray caught the light and turned it to mist. She set her tote down, cradled the diploma case with both hands, and let herself finally breathe. Most people would have given up. You know. The voice came from behind her, smooth, unmistakable. She turned. He stood a few feet away, hands in, his pockets now, tie loosened just enough to look like he'd been there for hours and still wasn't tired. The crowd, for a strange moment, seemed to blur around them again. Up close in daylight, he looked even more composed. There was a faint crease between his brows, like he was always thinking 3 moves ahead. "You did well," he said simply. Maya swallowed. "You came. I said I would," he replied. "You walked. You didn't let the weight of the last 4 years or the last 24 hours keep you in your seat. That matters more than you think." Her eyes burned unexpectedly. She blinked hard. "Most people," he continued, "would have taken last night as a sign they're in over their head. They would have decided $100 was proof the world doesn't want them in rooms like this and quietly stepped back." "I didn't have a choice," she said. "I've come too far to quit." "There's always a choice," he said softly. "And you chose to fight for 1 more inch." He stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. The fountain spray threw cool droplets across his suit jacket. but he didn't seem to notice. Sometimes, he said, watching her carefully, the smallest gesture, a borrowed pair of shoes, $100, a question asked on a rainy street is the first step into a much bigger life. Her fingers tightened around the diploma case. What does that mean? It means, he said, you're standing at a crossroads, whether you realize it or not. You can walk out of here, go home, and keep fighting alone. Or, he let the word hang between them. Or what? She asked, heart pounding. His gaze held hers, steady, like he was weighing if she was ready to hear the rest. Or you can decide you're ready for a life that doesn't just happen to you, he said. A life you step into with your head up. A life that will demand more of you than you're used to, but give more back than you've ever had. The sounds of celebration swelled around them, laughter, shouts, camera clicks, but the space between them stayed strangely still. Do you want that life, Maya? He asked quietly. Really want it? Her throat closed around an answer she couldn't quite form. He didn't push. He just looked at her for another long moment, like her silence was an answer too. Think about it, he said at last, slipping one hand out of his pocket, revealing nothing but the faint impression of a watch mark on his wrist. Tonight, tomorrow, let your fear say what it wants to say. Listen to it, then decide. Before she could ask who he was, what he wanted, or what any of this had to do with $100 and a pair of shoes, someone called his name from across the courtyard, a staff member, by the look of the badge. He glanced over, then back at her. We're not finished, you and I, he said. Not yet. Then he stepped away, blending into the crowd with the easy confidence of someone used to moving through celebrations, without being the center of them. Maya stood by the fountain, water droplets peppering her gown, his words echoing in her mind. Do you want that life? She clutched her diploma case closer, the polished shoes firm beneath her, and felt the questions settle into her bones like the beginning of an earthquake. That night, the apartment felt smaller than ever. The post-graduation buzz had faded into a dull ache behind Maya's eyes. The navy gown lay draped over the only chair. Her diploma case sat on the table like a fragile promise, and by the door, right where she'd left them, the borrowed shoes waited silent, impossibly shiny, so out of place against the scuffed floor and peeling baseboards that they almost looked like part of someone else's life. She'd kicked them off the second she walked in, toes relieved and legs sore. But now, barefoot in an oversized t-shirt, she kept pacing, past them, past the sink full of dishes, past the chipped counter, then back again. Every loop of the tiny space replayed the day. The rain on Eastwood Avenue. The words she'd nearly choked on. Can I borrow $100 to pay for my diploma? His face when she'd said it. Calm, interested, like he wasn't just hearing a request for money, but listening to something deeper. The moment he'd set his polished shoes beside her shredded sneakers and told her they didn't carry her story, she did. The graduation hall, his quiet nod from the stands, the fountain, the way he'd said, sometimes the smallest gesture is the first step into a bigger life. Do you want that life, Maya? She shoved her hands into her hair and exhaled hard. Who are you? She muttered to the empty room. She didn't know his name. Not really. She only knew the shape of him in her mind. Gray eyes that missed nothing. The way people moved around him like he owned the air. The way he talked about choice like it was a test most people failed. Her mom's voice rose up from somewhere deep inside, roughened by years of night shifts and double shifts, and walking home in cheap sneakers through dark parking lots. Don't let help cost who you are, baby. Free things are rarely free. Maya stopped pacing and leaned her forehead against the cool window. Outside, the streetlights painted the cracked sidewalk in patches of yellow. Somewhere down the block, a couple argued. A siren wailed in the distance. She closed her eyes. Her whole life had been a balancing act between hunger and pride. Taking just enough help to survive. Never so much she lost herself. She'd seen people in her neighborhood accept opportunities that turned out to be traps. Relationships that were really leverage. Mentors who only showed up when they wanted something. What if he's like that? What if this bigger life comes with strings you can't cut later? But then she saw again the look on his face when he watched her cross the stage. Not hungry, not possessive, just intent, like he was watching a bet he'd placed on the smallest odds finally pay off. Her gaze drifted back to the shoes. They'd carried her through one of the most important walks of her life, but the diploma balance still loomed. The rest of her bills still waited. The crossroads he'd spoken about didn't vanish just because she'd flipped a tassel. This is real, she whispered. This is a crossroads. She turned off the light and went to bed. Sleep didn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw rainy sidewalks, stage lights, gray eyes at a distance, and the question that wouldn't stop echoing. Do you want that life? When her alarm finally went off, it felt less like morning and more like a continuation of the same restless night. Campus was still buzzing the next day. Some grads were already posing for day-after photos. Others hauled suitcases into ride-shares, headed back to hometowns or forward to big city internships. The courtyard hummed with the soft chaos of endings and beginnings. Maya sat on a low wall under a tree, diploma case in her lap, trying to push down the tiny pinch in her chest as she watched families load cars with boxes and plans. Her own future still felt like a blank screen with a blinking cursor. She wore jeans and a clean white t-shirt. Her hair was pulled up, no makeup, but on her feet, the polished shoes gleamed in the morning light. She'd almost put her old sneakers back on, almost told herself yesterday was a one-time hallucination. Instead, she'd polished the shoes with a plain cloth until they shone even brighter. If this is a test, she'd thought, I'm going to show up prepared. Miss Collins? The voice slid into the space like it belonged there. She looked up. He stood a few feet away, as steady and deliberate as he'd been outside the fountain, as composed as he'd been in the stands. Same calm presence, different, suit lighter today, with an open collar that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. In his hand, he held a small, formal envelope. Her throat went dry. You came back, she said, the words sounding smaller in the open courtyard than they had in her head. I said we weren't finished, he replied. He stepped closer and held out the envelope between two fingers. This, he said, is an extension of our conversation. Consider it the next inch. Maya wiped her palms discreetly on her jeans before taking it. The paper felt thick, expensive. Her name was written on the front in neat, deliberate ink. Miss Maya Collins. Her heart tripped over itself. Inside, folded with crisp precision, was a single cream-colored card. The handwriting matched the outside. Maya, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move anyway. You made that decision on Eastwood Avenue. Then again, on the stage. If you are willing to make it one more time, come to the address, below, at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring nothing but yourself. A man who prefers to invest in perseverance. Below the message, in printed text, was an address downtown. She recognized the street name it was where some of the city's biggest glass and steel towers lived, the ones she'd stared up at from the bus and wondered what it felt like to work there instead of sweeping around them at 3 a.m. She looked up at him, card trembling. You wrote this? She asked. I did. What is this? Her voice shook. Some kind of job interview? A scam? A social experiment? One corner of his mouth lifted. You're asking the right questions, he said, but I won't answer them here. The only thing that matters right now is whether you're willing to walk through one more open door. And if I don't, she pushed, if I just throw this away and pretend none of this ever happened. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened again. Then you'll still be the girl who fought her way through 4 years of college without breaking, he said quietly. You'll still be the one who asked a stranger for $100 to pay for her diploma instead of letting it go. You'll still be the one who crossed that stage. His gaze flicked briefly to her shoes, then back to her face. But you'll never know what might have happened if you'd said yes one more time. He stepped back, giving her space. I'll be there tomorrow at 9, he said. If you come, we'll talk. If you don't, I won't come looking for you. He held her eyes for one steady, deliberate beat. The choice, as always, is yours. Then he turned and walked away, absorbed into the movement of students and families, until he was just another suit in the crowd. Back in her apartment that afternoon, the silence felt louder. The envelope sat in the middle of the table, the card open, the downtown address staring up at her like coordinates to another universe. Her fingers traced the ink of her name. She tried to picture what might be waiting there, an office, a conference room, a lesson, a humiliation, some cruel reveal that this was all a joke, a test she'd never agreed to, or something else, something she didn't dare name. Her mind pulled backward, not forward, to being 8 years old, watching her mother come home after the late shift, shoes soaked, hands red from cleaning chemicals, the heat shut off because the bill was overdue again, the two of them eating ramen at a wobbly card table under 3 blankets, steam fogging the single kitchen window. The world won't wait for you, baby, her mom had said then, pressing the last egg into Maya's bowl. You fight for every inch. No one's going to hand you anything. To being 13, standing in a thrift store, clutching a too big backpack for the first day of high school, while other kids posted photos of new sneakers and designer hoodies. To being 16, filling out college applications on a borrowed computer at the public library while other kids talked about campus tours and legacy admissions and summer abroad programs. Her whole life had been proof that her mother was right. The world didn't wait. No one handed her anything. Except now, someone had. Not everything. Not a miracle fix, but something. A pair of shoes. A question. An invitation. Is this what an open door looks like? Or is it just another trap? Fear curled in her gut, whispering worst-case scenarios. Gratitude tugged in the other direction, pointing to the way he'd watched her without gloating, to how he'd walked barefoot into a car without flinching, how he'd said he wouldn't come looking for her if she said no. He wasn't chasing her. He was letting her choose. For a long time, she sat there, the smell of stale coffee clinging to the wallpaper, the hum of the aging fridge filling the gaps in her thoughts. Finally, she stood. Carefully, she picked up the shoes from where she'd left them by the door and set them on a towel. She took an old t-shirt and polished them until the leather glowed again. If I go, she whispered, I go on my terms, not as some poor girl begging for $100, as someone who's earned her way into whatever room that is. She laid out simple, neat clothes for the morning: black slacks, a soft blouse that didn't shout but still looked grown. She braided her hair loosely and set her alarm. Then, for the first time in 2 days, she slept. The next morning, the city felt sharper. The sky was clear, blue stretching wide over the downtown towers. The bus ride was a blur of stops and starts, the plastic seat sticky under her palms. With each passing block, her heart pounded harder. When she stepped off in front of the address from the card, she almost stopped breathing. The building was all glass and steel, its surface reflecting the sky and the smaller structures around it. People in suits streamed in and out through revolving doors. A logo she'd seen 100 times in business articles and scholarship brochures gleamed above the entryway. Pierce West Holdings. Her brain scrambled. She knew that name. Everybody in her major knew that name. It was a massive investment and consulting firm, one of those companies students dreamed about but rarely even got interviews with. What are you doing here, Maya? She swallowed hard, adjusted the strap of her tote, and walked toward the doors before she could talk herself into turning back. Inside, the lobby was all marble and glass, high ceilings and clean lines. A giant abstract painting dominated one wall. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive coffee. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. Good morning. Welcome to Pierce West. May I help you? Maya cleared her throat. I was told to come here at 9. For a meeting. Your name? The receptionist asked. Maya Collins. Something flickered across the woman's face recognition. He's expecting you, she said smoothly. Please, have a seat. The elevator will be ready for you in just a moment. He's expecting you. Not, who are you again? Not, do you have an appointment? He's expecting you. Maya sat on the edge of a sleek chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. Every cell in her body buzzed. An elevator dinged. The receptionist nodded toward it. Top floor, Miss Collins. Someone will meet you when you step out. The ride up felt like being launched into orbit. Glass walls gave her a view of the city dropping away beneath her, streets turning to lines, people to dots. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, hair pulled back neatly, blouse smooth, eyes wide. The shoes at her feet were the only sign of yesterday, gleaming with each small shift of her weight. When the doors slid open on the top floor, he was there. No assistant, no security escort. Just him, standing with his hands in his pockets. The city skyline fanned out behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. He looked exactly like he had in every other moment, and yet somehow more himself here, in this space. Right on time, he said. Good. Maya stepped out, the soles of her polished shoes sinking into a thick rug. Her heart felt like it was beating in her throat. I never got your name, she managed. He studied her for a fraction of a second, as if deciding whether she was ready to hear it. Logan Pierce, he said at last. I prefer Logan outside these walls. Inside them, most people insist on Mr. Pierce. The name hit her like a physical force. Logan Pierce, as in half the name on the building. Pierce West, as in one of the CEO Millionaire's professors casually mentioned when talking about case studies and unreachable success stories. Her knees actually wobbled. You're, she breathed. A CEO Millionaire? He finished lightly. Yes, I suppose that's one way to put it. Also a man who prefers not to walk away when the universe drops a very stubborn, very capable poor girl in front of his car asking for $100 to pay for her diploma. Heat flooded her cheeks. You knew, she whispered. The whole time. I knew some of it, he corrected. I knew enough to be curious. He turned and gestured toward a glass office with a sweeping view of the city. Come on. Let's talk where we can both sit down. This day is going to ask a lot of you. Inside, the office was surprisingly uncluttered. A large desk, a couple of chairs, a few framed photos that looked like they belonged to another life entirely. Logan motioned for her to take a seat. She did, perching on the edge, fingers twisting in her lap. He moved behind the desk, opened a laptop, and with a few keystrokes, turned the screen toward her. Her breath caught. On the screen were files, each one with her name, student records, scholarship, applications, copies of essays she'd poured her soul into and then forgotten, notes from faculty. Professor Harper's name jumped out at her first. Work history, the diner, the library, the cleaning crew, volunteer records from a community youth program she'd squeezed in on Sundays. "What is all this?" she whispered. "Information," he said calmly. "Pieces of a story. Yours. You've been watching me." The words came out half stunned, half defensive. "I've been aware of you," he corrected. "There's a difference. We work with the university on several scholarship and mentorship programs. Names cross my desk. Most of them blur together after a while. Good grades, decent potential. Nothing remarkable." He tapped the screen lightly. "Then there are a few profiles that refuse to be ignored." He met her eyes, steady. "You were one of them." Maya's chest felt too tight for her lungs. "Why?" she asked. I'm nobody. I just worked and studied and tried not to fail." "You held a 3.9 gigapascals while working 3 jobs," he said. "You never dropped below full-time status. You took on extra projects no one required because you said you wanted to understand how the whole machine works, not just my tiny piece. You volunteered with kids who didn't believe college was for them because you knew exactly how that feels." He leaned back, folding his hands, and when the university sent over a list of students at risk of not clearing their final balances, he added softly, "Your name was on it." Her cheeks burned. "So you knew I couldn't pay the last $100. "I knew," he said. "What I didn't know was what you'd do about it." He nodded toward her feet. "Until you stopped my car in the rain and asked a stranger on Eastwood Avenue, 'Can I borrow $100 to pay for my diploma?' That, Miss Collins, was the moment I decided it was time to step out of the file and into your story." Silence settled between them for a moment, thick and humming. "You could have just paid the balance quietly," she murmured. "Why the shoes? Why all of this?" "Because I don't invest in people who don't know how to fight for themselves," he said simply. "Money can't teach grit. I needed to see whether you'd ask, whether you'd walk in those shoes, whether you'd show up here today without knowing what was on the other side of the elevator doors." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a slim folder, placing it gently in front of her. "This is what happens next," he said, "if you want it." Her fingers hovered above the folder, afraid to touch it. "What is it?" "An offer," he said. "Mentorship. A paid fellowship here at Pierce West, with rotations through departments that match your interests. Funding to clear the remainder of your university balance and support for a graduate program if you choose to pursue one. Resources. Networks." His gaze sharpened. "Access to rooms it usually takes people 10 years of the right connections to even peek into." Her head spun. "This isn't charity," he continued, voice firm. "I don't do pity. This is partnership. I invest where potential meets perseverance. You've already proved you can survive with nothing. I want to see what you can do when the right doors are open." Images cascaded through her mind. Her mom's tired hands, the library floors, the diner's greasy light, the nights she wondered if any of it would lead anywhere. The feeling of those stage lights on her face, the pull in her chest when he'd asked, "Do you want that life? And what do you expect in return?" she asked, forcing the question out past the lump in her throat. "There's always something. What does a CEO millionaire get out of a poor girl like me?" For the first time, something like real warmth broke across his features. "Results," he said. "Work, ideas, honesty. I expect you to show up, to do the hard things, to ask uncomfortable questions, to tell me when I'm wrong." He paused. "And, eventually, I expect you to do for someone else what I'm doing for you. To remember what it felt like to stand where you are right now and be the one who opens the door." Her eyes stung. She looked down at the folder. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, pages outlined a structured program, clear timelines, stipends, responsibilities. There was a section about mentorship sessions with senior partners, another about funding for certifications, another about a community initiative she'd helped design. It wasn't vague. It was real, concrete. Her vision blurred. All her life, she'd been scraping for inches. This was miles. But the old voices didn't go completely silent. What if you get swallowed up? What if you lose yourself in rooms like this? What if this life changes you into someone your mom wouldn't recognize? She closed the folder slowly and looked up at him. "My mom always said the world won't wait for me," she said, her voice raw. "That I'd have to fight for every inch. I've been doing that for as long as I can remember. I don't know how to be the girl who gets handed this." He nodded, eyes steady. "Then don't be that girl," he said. Be the woman who earned the right to be here and decided not to let fear make her say no. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. What if I fail? She whispered. His gaze softened. Then you fail forward, he said. You learn. You adjust. You get back up. That's all I'm betting on, that you'll keep getting back up. Her fingers tightened on the folder. Your diploma hold, he added quietly, as if sensing one of the smaller, sharper fears still lodged in her mind. It's already taken care of. The registrar will release it this afternoon. Consider that the down payment on the faith I'm placing in you. Her breath caught. You paid it? She asked. Eventually, he said. Or rather, the foundation did. I don't want you spending the rest of your life telling a story about how you lost your future over $100. A laugh broke out of her. Half sob, half relief. She stared at the folder, then at the city beyond the glass, then at the man across the desk, who somehow straddled the line between terrifying and exactly what she'd always needed, without knowing how to ask. Her mother's warning whispered again. Don't let help cost who you are. Maya drew in a long, steady breath. Then I'll make sure it doesn't, she said. She straightened in her chair, feeling the shoes firm beneath her feet, the weight of the folder solid in her hands. I accept, she said clearly, on one condition. An eyebrow lifted. Oh, that I don't have to stop being the girl who knows what it costs to walk here, she said. I won't pretend I came from money. I won't forget what it felt like to stand in the rain begging for $100. I want to bring that with me, into whatever rooms you're offering. A slow, approving smile curved his lips. Good, he said. That's exactly who I'm inviting. He extended his hand. She took it. His grip was firm, grounding. Welcome to a bigger life, Maya Collins, he said. Just remember, this isn't about the shoes, or the money, or even me. He released her hand, nodding toward her feet. It's about the person who kept walking when every step hurt, he said. That's the one who'll do something with this. Later, when she stepped out of the building and back onto the city sidewalk, the world looked the same. Cars honked, people hurried, a bus belched exhaust at the corner. Somewhere not far away, Eastwood Avenue kept moving like it always had, but as she walked down the steps in the once borrowed, now symbolic shoes, clutching the folder against her chest, everything felt changed. The leather under her feet no longer felt like someone else's life. It felt like armor, forged from every mile she'd walked in sneakers with holes. Each step on the concrete wasn't just forward, it was up. She thought of her mother, of cold rooms and whispered mantras. She thought of stages and fountains and gray eyes in the crowd. She thought of poor girls begging for $100 and CEO millionaires who, for reasons beyond her understanding, chose to invest in them. And as the sun broke fully through the clouds, washing the street in bright, unforgiving light, she realized something. The shoes had never been the point. They were a testament to every hard step she'd taken alone, to the moment she'd swallowed her pride and asked, to this new, terrifying, exhilarating chapter she was choosing to claim. She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and walked on into a city that had once chewed her sneakers apart but would now have to learn the shape of her stride. Whatever shocked everyone about what happened after she asked for $100, she knew this much. What stunned her most was not that a CEO millionaire had opened a door. It was that, for the first time in her life, she believed she had every right to walk through it.